Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matty here, and yeah, new cards have been announced. The next mini set to be released in Pokemon Pocket was teased today in a trailer, and it is called Extradimensional Crisis, or ED Crisis for short, which is pretty funny. But yeah, a bunch of new cards were teased. This is going to be a set focused around Ultra Beasts, still with that Sun and Moon Generation 7 theme. A bunch of new cards were released. In this video, we're going to go over everything that was shown, all of the new cards. We're going to talk about things from a meta perspective, from a strategic perspective, and what I think of these new cards. Now, one thing I will say is that this set is set to release on May 29th. That is a week from today. And again, we've only seen a handful of the new cards that were shown in the trailer, but over the next week or so, we should get maybe some data mines or leaks that reveal the rest of the set and all of the cards. So stay tuned for that. We're going to cover everything as it comes through. Definitely really excited. The format right now, since the Celesteela Guardian set came out, has kind of been as wide open as any format in Pokemon Pocket has ever been before, and I think the metagame is in a really, really good spot. So new cards coming out in a week from now definitely could shake things up a little bit for, the metagame, but at least at the moment, things are definitely wide open. So I don't necessarily think, the format, at least right now, has been completely figured out. But anyway, let's dive into these new cards. Now, one point to make, always, whenever we get sort of the trailers for the new cards, is that a lot of the cards seem underwhelming because we don't have the full set, we don't have all of the contacts, we don't have, all of the synergizing Pokemon or support Pokemon or trainer cards that, could kind of make some of these cards better. So keep that in mind. A lot of the cards in this set necessarily aren't going to seem very strong. That's always how it kind of goes, right? When Triumphant Light was announced, a lot of the cards seemed really weak, but then a lot of those cards ended up being at the top of the metagame. So you kind of have to just keep that in mind, and we'll have to see exactly, what goes on when all of these cards are, again, officially released, but, we'll see. I mean, that's really how it goes. Now, one thing I will do before we get into all of the Pokemon is just showcase the one supporter card that was showcased, in the trailer. It's the only one that we have so far, but it will certainly provide a lot of context for basically all of the Ultra Beast cards that we're going to take a look at following this. So that is going to be Lusamine, or I believe that's how you say Lusamine. And this is a supporter card that is, again, specifically made for the Ultra Beast Pokemon type, which is kind of a new category of Pokemon that is coming out in this particular set, but it's kind of been a thing in Pokemon TCG. Ultra Beasts are Pokemon. They act the same as Pokemon, but they have a little title on the cards that say Ultra Beast, and it kind of distinguishes them from the rest of the Pokemon, and there's certain effects and synergies and trainer cards, item cards, supporter cards that are all, I guess, specifically made for Ultra Beasts. So Lusamine reads, and this is the 2-star SR version of the supporter card. There'll be a normal version as well. This reads that you can use this card only if your opponent has gotten at least 1 point, meaning, you can't use it really super early in the game. Your opponent has to have taken a KO first. And this reads that you choose one of your Ultra Beasts and you attach 2 random energies from your discard pile to that Pokemon. So this is a card that is going to work for exclusively Ultra Beasts, but for any Ultra Beast, and it works for any energy type. Any 2 random energies from your discard pile, and you get to attach them to one of your Ultra Beast Pokemon, as long as your opponent has taken at least 1 point. Now, that may sound like a pretty significant limiter on this card, but I think the whole idea with it is basically in the late game to set up additional Ultra Beast Pokemon really easily, allowing you to kind of commit all of your energies to the active, and kind of ride that out, do some attacks until you get KO'd, and then set up the second Ultra Beast a lot easier than the first one. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this card does kind of perform. Combo cards like this typically aren't that great, but because this is more of a late game card anyway, and it's going to enable our Ultra Beasts later in the game, it's probably something that's actually going to be fairly consistent. It's not like things like Kiawe where you kind of want it right off the bat. This is a card where the longer the game goes on, the more likely you are to have drawn into a Lusamine, and it's going to be able to provide value later in the game when that kind of, comes down to it. So a really, really strong card. I wanted to showcase this particular supporter card before we talk about the Ultra Beasts, because now we can keep this card in mind as we take a look at all of the other Ultra Beast cards that were announced in the trailer. Now let's go all the way back to the beginning and take a look. We did get 3 new EX Pokemon that were, again, teased to come out in this mini set. Now that's 3. We typically get, I think, 4 or 5 EX cards in a mini set, so I believe we probably have 1 or 2 additional EX cards that have yet to be revealed, so keep that in mind. But anyway, these are the 3 that were shown so far. The first one is going to be Buzzwole. And Buzzwole is a really, really strong Pokemon traditionally, but this is going to be a grass-type card because it is bug and fighting in the game's weak to fire. 140 HP, which isn't a tremendous amount of HP for a basic Pokemon, but it's certainly a decent amount. Like, that's sort of like a pretty average I guess, sort of HP quantity that we would like to see. There's a lot of basic EX Pokemon with 150, but 140 is not bad either. You got to keep in mind, we also have access to the new Leaf Cape from Celestial Guardian. So effectively, with Leaf Cape, this is a basic EX Pokemon with 170 HP, and we also have access to Erica's, which can heal 50 from it. But it's got 2 attacks, retreat cost of 2, weak to fire, punch, 2 colorless energies, 30 damage, and then we have Big Beat, 120 for 2 grass energies and a colorless, that's 3 total. And during your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Big Beat. So this card, in first glance, seems a little bit underwhelming. Of course, I like to look at a card like this and kind of compare it to something maybe like Palkia EX, where Palkia can do 30 damage for 1 energy, and then for 4 energies does 150 plus the bench damage, and then you discard all of those energies. Now, 120 isn't a significant amount of damage. If you pair it with the 30, so that's 150 in total, that is enough to KO a lot of other Pokemon. Maybe we slap a red in there and we're doing 170. That's enough to maybe KO a stage 2 Pokemon, a stage 2 EX Pokemon, but truthfully, this card at first glance does seem a little bit underwhelming, especially since, again, we are weak to fire. So even with Leaf Cape going up to 170, things like a Stoke Charizard from Shining Revelry will be able to one-hit KO us, so that is a little bit of a downside. Charizard does see some play in the format right now, but one thing, again, that we have to keep in mind is this Big Beat attack doing 120, and then we can't use this attack next turn. It's realistically not like the biggest deal in the world, and I'll tell you why in just a second. In fact, I am actually just going to immediately skip forward to Celesteela, which is a non-EX basic colorless Ultra Beast Pokemon. Now, this is a basic Pokemon with 120 HP, and it is colorless, so it's actually fairly significant. It is weak to electric, but retreat cost of 4, that's not going to be that big of a deal, and that's because of the ability Ultra Thrusters. Once during your turn, you may switch your active Pokemon, or sorry, your active Ultra Beast with one of your benched Ultra Beast Pokemon. Now, this is different than retreat, right? This is a full swap, right? The same type of effect that you would get from like a Sabrina or a Cyrus. However, it's on your turn, and you get to choose which Pokemon you're swapping in. So effectively, this means that we can double pivot now in Pokemon Pocket. Not something that I don't believe we've been able to do at all in one turn. There were some effects that maybe after you attack, you retreat, but then your turn ends. So this is the first opportunity that we have to basically, like, I call it like double pivot, but basically you can retreat twice or swap in Pokemon 2 times in a single turn. We haven't been able to do that in Pokemon Pocket before. It is something that we've seen from time to time in the official Pokemon trading card game, so it's interesting to see, but this is certainly a card that's meant to kind of be paired with Buzzwole in the sense that, you know, Buzzwole here, again, retreat cost of 2 isn't too substantial, but theoretically what we can do is we can utilize Buzzwole with Celesteela and maybe with Leaf as well. So what we can do effectively is if Buzzwole is in the active spot, we can attack. On our next turn, we can't use Big Beat again. However, we can play Leaf, retreat into Celesteela, and then use the Ultra Thrusters to swap back into the Buzzwole, effectively resetting that effect that is on Buzzwole. Again, it's not something that we've seen in Pokemon Pocket before, but that is how the cards work in the traditional Pokemon TCG. Any effect that's on your Pokemon, whether that's a status condition or any kind of effect from an attack, anything like that, gets reset after you swap to the bench and then back to the active. So theoretically, with Celesteela and maybe some retreat combination of like X-Speed or Leaf should allow us to attack turn after turn with Buzzwole, which is fairly strong. It is kind of an awkward combination. I don't think it's something that we're necessarily going to see like too often, but one thing to note with Buzzwole is that even with Celesteela is that we might be able to just, after we attack, retreat into another attacking Pokemon. That is, certainly something that maybe can attack with a low energy cost. And then that way we at least have like a buffer. We don't have to necessarily double pivot, although that is an option. It does allow us to effectively retreat for free without discarding the energy. So Celesteela is a really interesting Pokemon. And I wanted to showcase this card specifically and talk about it quite a bit because I actually just think it's a really relevant card. Now we do this attack here, Moonbaton. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that attack. One thing to note is all of the Ultra Beasts have like a musical theme to them for whatever the reason. But anyway, this attack, 3 colorless energies, 100 damage. You flip a coin, but if it's tails, this attack does nothing. So this attack can be used in some scenarios. And again, we can use Lusamine to accelerate energies to this Pokemon to use this attack, but certainly not a very consistent or great attack. But 120 HP for a colorless Pokemon is pretty interesting, and I think the effect is really strong. So basically, this Ultra Thrusters ability is going to work for any Ultra Beast Pokemon, and that kind of accounts for Celesteela itself. So that being a Pokemon that we can kind of keep in the active spot as basically like a wall, while also being a free pivot. So 120 HP as a basic colorless Pokemon, non-EX, is actually quite a bit. With Giant Cape, we go up to, 140, or Rocky Helmet to maybe deal some extra damage. We are weak to Electric, however, we haven't seen Electric that relevant in the format right now. We are getting hit for weakness on things like Oricorio that can 2-hit KO us, but We also have Lima from Genetic Ape, or not Genetic Apex, from Celestial Guardians, which basically means that, what we can do as well as a double pivot maneuver is that we can use Ultra Thrusters, swap in Celesteela to the active spot, and then maybe play Lima if we have any damage onto us, and then we can pick this card up and then put it into our hand and then effectively double pivot as well. So it's an interesting Pokemon. I think it's going to see a ton of play in really most of the Ultra Beast decks, mainly because it's a Pokemon that if you lead with it, again, it's kind of a free retreat. You can just choose to go into your Ultra Beasts at any time. As long as they're, an Ultra Beast Pokemon, you can swap it with any of them on your bench. And I think that's pretty strong. And again, it will work for any Celesteela itself, right? So it's basically like a free pivot. It's a Pokemon that we certainly don't care to, or we don't mind leading with it, because as long as we're playing it in an Ultra Beast deck, we can choose to get out of the active spot at any time. And again, it does have a decent amount of HP. So I think Celesteela is a really relevant Pokemon. Certainly works well with Buzzwole, but next up, let's talk about the next EX Pokemon, which is something that I'm a little bit afraid of, but also maybe super excited about. Certainly the card to me that seems the strongest at first glance, and that is going to be Guzzlord, I think it's Guzzlord EX. And Guzzlord is really, really strong. 170 HP, Dark-type basic EX Pokemon. Again, Ultra. Also an Ultra Beast. Now, we are weak to Grass. Grass is very relevant in the format right now, but most Grass Pokemon aren't hitting for 150, so we should be able to live one hit anyway from any Grass Pokemon. But either way, certainly a lot of HP for this Pokemon, and it has a retreat cost of 4, but it has 2 interesting attacks. The first one to me is massively, massively interesting and probably very, very strong. It's Grind Core is the name of it. 2 colorless energies. So again, colorless energies in this attack cost for this Pokemon, so meaning we can play this in basically literally any deck in Pokemon Pocket. 30 damage, flip a coin until you get heads. For each heads, discard a random energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Okay, so yeah, you read that correctly. That is literally Team Rocket, or no, yeah, is it Team Rocket Grunt? I believe it's Team Rocket Grunt in the form of an attack, which is crazy because we can Team Rocket Grunt for the turn, and then we can just attack with Grindcore and effectively Grunt twice in one turn while doing 30 damage. Now, 2 energies isn't great for 30 damage, but this effect is phenomenally strong. Again, this is an Ultra Beast with high retreat cost, meaning with Celesteela, we can retreat out for free. We could even pair this with Solgaleo, which again, can swap in on its own for free, meaning that we can bypass this retreat cost a variety of different ways. It's basically a wall that kind of stalls. So it's like a stall wall. Now, we do have to commit 2 energies to it, but again, it's really not that big of a deal considering the fact that this thing is probably going to be around for a long time, not only with its high HP count, but its ability to discard energies from your opponent's active Pokemon, kind of leading this Pokemon to be massively annoying to deal with. We do have a Giant Cape to bring this up to 190. We still have Pokemon Center Lady and other forms of, healing that we can pair with Guzzlord. It's an incredibly strong Pokemon. I'm a little bit afraid of this card, mainly because of how splashable it is with the colorless energies and its attack cost. It does have Tyrannical Hole, by the way. This is the second attack cost. For 3 dark energies and a colorless, it does 120. This attack is pretty underwhelming. However, theoretically, in a dark type deck, we could just sort of grind core a couple turns and then hit for 120. So even in a dark type deck, Guzzlord could be actually quite strong. You could even pair it with Darkrai, so you get 2 energies on this thing. You start stalling, you start hitting for 30, and then we could kind of set up a Darkrai on our bench attached to it for the remaining turns, doing a little bit of extra chip damage on top of that 30 damage with Grindcore, and then eventually just go into Darkrai if Guzzlord gets KO'd. So I see a lot of different scenarios where this card is going to be really, really relevant. The other thing that we could honestly just pair Guzzlord with is Giratina. Giratina is a card that you can pair with really anything in Pokemon Pocket. But yeah, theoretically, you could just pair Guzzlord with Giratina, and you could just play Psychic Energy. You could play Psychic Giratina and then like double up on Giratina, or just go like 1 energy on Guzzlord, 1 on Giratina, and then, Broken Space Bellow, and then just kind of set them both up at the same turn, and then manually attach for the following turns while we grind core, setting up a KO for whatever is in the active spot with Giratina. So it's definitely really, really flexible and really strong. I think that this card might be a little bit too good. Now, again, we all understand how the coin flip stuff works in Pokemon Pocket. It's very inconsistent. It feels like, of course, the RNG is certainly not in our favor a lot of the times. It's just like Misty's. It's like Grunt. It's going to be insane. There will be times as well where maybe against like a Charizard or really anything, we can swap in Guzzlord and then we can basically just sort of attack to it. We can set this thing up in 1 turn, by the way, with Lusamine later in the game. If this is on a Pokemon we lead with, if this is in fact a Pokemon that we have later in the game, it can come in and then discard all of the energies. Let's say all 5 energies or whatever off of your opponent's active Charizard. They can't just stoke again, but still Definitely kind of scary to think that this Pokemon realistically can kind of lock down whatever's in the active spot while chipping away. A very, very scary Pokemon. 170 HP is a little bit crazy. Now, it is weak to Grass. I did say that before. Grass is definitely really relevant in the format right now, but truthfully, this is a kind of a crazy Pokemon. I expected to see a lot of play, whether it's in like Ultra Beast decks or paired with like Darkrai or Giratina. We'll have to see. It's a good Pokemon in my mind in the late game as well as the early game. Again, like the fact that we can use the Grunt supporter card and Grindcore in the same turn definitely makes me feel like we're going to be able to basically completely eliminate energies from our opponent's Pokemon fairly consistently, which is terrifying to me, especially on a Pokemon that's going to be really hard to win at KO. So yeah, that's Guzzlord. Absolutely crazy Pokemon. At first glance, potentially the strongest Pokemon, maybe the flagship Pokemon of this expansion. It's pretty crazy. I don't really have anything else to say about it. Yeah, there it is. There's Guzzlord. Okay, all right. Anyway, next up is Tapu Koko EX, which is an interesting Pokemon. For whatever the reason, I feel like a lot of the Electric-type Pokemon have felt a little bit underwhelming. For quite some time now, they just typically have a lot less HP, and they don't necessarily do a ton of damage. Now, one thing that they do have going for them is that they're very fast-paced. Tapu Koko EX is definitely in line with that. It's a very aggressive, fast-paced Pokemon. It's got 2 attacks here. Well, first of all, it's a basic Electric-type EX Pokemon, weak to fighting, retreat cost of 1. I would have liked to see this Pokemon with free retreat, personally. Tapu Koko is a very fast Pokemon, but anyway, 130 HP, which is a bit low. For reference, Guzzlord had 170, so 130 is a big difference here. But 130 HP, and we have 2 attacks here. Plasma Hurricane. For 1 lightning energy, we do 20 damage, and then we take an energy from our zone and attach it to this Pokemon. So effectively kind of ramping up itself, for 1 energy, 20 damage. And then we have Mach Bolt, which is 90. So the whole idea with this card, I think, is that, we want to lead off with this Pokemon, maybe go second, attack on our first turn for 20, and then on our second turn, going second. Yeah, second turn going second, we can Mach Bolt for 90. Theoretically, that is 110 damage. That's enough to KO some Pokemon for sure. And, again, if we survive that next turn as well, then we can just keep attacking for 90. It's a very fast-paced, aggressive card. Theoretically, this is going to be really, really good and aggressive going second, but going first, it's going to feel quite bad because we're not going to be able to do really enough damage until turn 3, and by then our opponent is probably pretty set up on their own right. So it's certainly an interesting Pokemon that I think going second will be quite strong. And to me, it kind of feels like a really fast-paced, like aggressive electric Pokemon to maybe punish some of those, stage 2 rare candy decks in the scenario where maybe they don't get rare candy, and we can just sort of start KOing their Pokemon from really early on in the game. I think it could be really strong in that sense. Again, 90 damage isn't like too crazy, but it is enough to 2 KO most Pokemon in the format. Still quite a few Pokemon that are weak to electric. It's one of the best typing in the game in terms of hitting for weakness. Just a lot of Pokemon are weak to electric, but fighting is also fairly relevant. Rampardos is going to absolutely body us, so we got to keep that in mind. I think that Tapu Koko is a fairly strong Pokemon, but at first glance to me, it doesn't seem that crazy. Now, because it's electric type, we can pair this with something like an Oricorio, so it could just be sort of a throw-in partner that's going to be really good to pair with Oricorio in the scenarios where Oricorio isn't very useful, because you also have to think that like Oricorio is really good against certain decks that are playing EX Pokemon and don't necessarily have a lot of non-EX Pokemon to deal with Oricorio. But those matchups, like against things like Meowscarada or really any other, non-EX Pokemon that can deal with Oricorio quite easily, Tapu Koko should be able to deal with those Pokemon pretty easily as well. So retreat cost of 1, we can just sort of X-speed go into Oricorio if we need to. It's basically, I think, a good partner for Oricorio because it's going to be able to punish some of those, non-EX Pokemon that, realistically, we kind of use to counter Oricorio. It kind of fills those gaps a little bit decently. I don't know. This is a card to me that feels a little bit underwhelming, quite personally, but the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that with Lusamine, we can actually go Tapu Koko 90 damage. Even if we get KO'd, we can go to a second Tapu Koko, Lusamine up 2 energies, attach 1, and then just continually attack for 90 damage. So that's one theme that you're going to see with Ultra Beasts is that they string together really easily. They ramp themselves up, and then you can kind of ramp up the second Ultra Beast very, very effectively with Lusamine. And again, we kind of see that with Buzzwole as well. Theoretically, if we do attack with Big Beat, we get KO'd, we can just throw in another Buzzwole and then Lusamine and get this thing set up. So with Lusamine, the 2 energies from it plus the attachment for the turn means that we should be able to, late in the game, get 3 energies on any of your Ultra Beast Pokemon very, very easily, and that is somewhat relevant in my mind. One of the reasons why I think Guzzlord EX might actually be also really relevant, because in a scenario where we are actually just playing Dark Energies and we're committing to Guzzlord, if it does get KO'd, again, we can just sort of set up our second Guzzlord pretty easily with Lusamine, and I think that's the main strategy and the main upside to Lusamine, and why I think a lot of these cards are actually going to be a bit better than you might think. If you take a look and you really think back to a lot of the decks that see play in the format right now, they really are about ramping up like one Pokemon and then like hopefully just sort of sweeping your opponent. However, the upside to Ultra Beast seems that maybe they're not going to be as strong as some of the other Pokemon in the format, but your ability to string two of them together is quite strong, especially some of these EX Pokemon with decent amount of HP, like Buzzwole with Leaf Cape. Right, it's going to stick around for a little while, and with Erica's, and then even when you get KO'd, you can set up your second Buzzwole immediately, and that is quite strong if you actually really think about it. But Guzzlord is also kind of the same effect, and same with Tapu Koko. Like I said, this Pokemon ramps itself up, and then once Tapu Koko goes down, again, we can basically set up our second one immediately with Lusamine. So that is somewhat relevant, something to keep in mind as to how these Ultra Beast decks will flow. Now, we probably are going to get some other supporter cards or trainer cards, maybe even an item card, and other Pokemon as well that are going to buff and I guess sort of synergize with Ultra Beasts. That's what the set is really all about. So we're probably going to see some other stuff that is going to make these Pokemon even better. But for now, again, the full context, the full idea with these decks is that they kind of stick around and they're very kind of persistent in terms of them always sort of being able to do something turn after turn. So I think that's actually going to be pretty strong. And it's going to kind of bypass a lot of sort of the downsides that a lot of the ramp decks have in Pokemon Pocket right now. Sans maybe like some Giratina decks that can, of course, like Giratina Darkrai, which can ramp two Pokemon at the same time. That's a big reason why Giratina is so good, is because it is sort of independent and you can kind of ramp up two Pokemon at the same time, and it kind of bypasses that issue that we just talked about, but so do Ultra Beasts with Lusamine. So certainly interesting. I like Tapu Koko. I don't think it's necessarily too crazy, but maybe we get some more support for it. And like I said, it could just be a really good partner for Oricorio. If there was also a really good Pokemon that was maybe beneficial going first to pair with Tapu Koko, then that could also be really good, because Tapu Koko itself certainly likes to go second, doesn't love to go first. So keep that in mind. Next up, we've got Nihilego or Nihilego. I never know how to pronounce this Pokemon's name. But anyway, Dark-type Ultra Beast. This is a poison and rock Pokemon, I believe, in the game. So interesting to see a Dark-type poison Pokemon. Typically are dark in Pokemon Pocket. But anyway, basic 70 HP Ultra Beast, dark Pokemon, weak to fighting, retreat cost of 1. And this has a really interesting ability here. And this is more poison. Just simply called More Poison is the ability, and it reads that your opponent's active Pokemon takes 10 plus damage from being poisoned. Now, this ability does stack. So if you have 2 of these Pokemon on your bench, then whenever your opponent's is poisoned, they effectively take 30 damage every turn from poison. That's actually fairly substantial. I don't think poison is too good in the format right now, specifically because so many Pokemon are evolving anyway in the format with Rare Candy that oftentimes they kind of just get rid of the status condition by evolving. Also, Pokemon Center Lady is still fairly common, and in general, Arceus is in the format as well, which is immune to status condition. So I don't think like statuses are super strong, but 30 damage every turn from poison is certainly pretty substantial. There are some pretty decent poison Pokemon in the game right now, and we also have Poison Barb. So you could also just kind of throw in this Pokemon in maybe a dark deck with Poison Barb, and it could be somewhat effective. Like, you could honestly play like Poison Barb, Guzma, Nihilego, and then basically like you're doing a lot of damage. And if your opponent has to attack you, which they do, they have to attack that active Guzzlord, then they're going to get poisoned, and then they're taking 30 more damage every turn, plus the 30 damage from Guzzlord, plus the energy discard that Guzzlord's doing. So at first glance, to me, this card does seem a little bit interesting and a little bit kind of like, is it really going to see that much play? I just don't think Poison sees that much play, but again, this is a card that doesn't really do anything. You can kind of just keep it on your bench and it can just sit there. It's got a retreat cost of 1, so if you do lead with it, it's not that terrible to get out of the active spot. Fairly easy as well. And then we also have the attack New Wave, 30 damage, and then you poison your opponent. So like I said, I think that it's going to see play in some interesting strategies. I don't know if that extra poison, if poison in general, even doing extra damage, is going to ever be that relevant in the format. Again, I'm kind of just spitballing here. I'm just coming up with some ideas. At first glance, that's what I kind of saw with this card. You could play like Clodsire, or maybe you could play like Scolipede, right? The old Scolipede that did like 120 or 130 to a poison Pokemon. We also have Weezing. There's a lot of like poison Pokemon in the format right now where you could kind of tack in Nihilego and do even more damage, butchering the pronunciation probably. So it's interesting. It might see play, but honestly, I think like at first glance, the best way to play this Pokemon is probably just going to be with Poison Barb Guzzlord, and that to me is pretty hilarious. So we'll have to see exactly how things pan out with this Pokemon, but certainly not terrible. by any means. Like, it's really not that terrible. But yeah, I mean, in a deck with like 2 Guzzlord and then 2 of these Pokemon, 2 Lusamine, 2 Poison Barb, and we're just sort of off to the races, and we're just super annoying to deal with. I think that could be pretty fun. But again, we'll have to exactly see. An interesting Pokemon nonetheless. It's interesting to have an effect like that, and it does stack, so there you go. Next up, though, we have Blacephalon, which is a very interesting Pokemon in my mind. Now, this is one of the Pokemon to me at first glance that seems terrible. Like, I think most people are going to look at this card and go, wow, what a bad card, and they're not really going to think twice about it, but I do think this card is a lot better than people give it credit for. Maybe. We'll have to see. So this is a basic Fire-type Ultra Beast Pokemon, weak to water and retreat cost of 2, 100 HP, but it has 1 attack, and that is Beat Punk. This attack does for 3 energies, for 2 fire and a colorless. It does 130 damage. However, it does 70 damage to itself. 100 HP, go down to 30 HP. Now, this, again, doesn't seem very good, but you got to keep in mind that with Lusamine, we are able to basically generate 3 energies in 1 turn to an Ultra Beast Pokemon later in the game after one of our Pokemon gets KO'd. So, theoretically speaking, what we could do is, attach fire energies to whatever is in our lead. That could be like Tartanator with Kiawe. It could be really any fire Pokemon. That fire Pokemon goes down. Those energies go in the discard pile. We could bring up Blacephalon, Lusamine to it, attach to it, and then in 1 turn on a basic Pokemon, a single prize Pokemon, hit for 130. With Red, which you can't do with Lusamine in the same turn, but maybe with Rocky Helmet as well, that goes up to like 150 total. So that is actually really, really strong. In some scenarios, in some like world, I could see this particular card being phenomenal in like a purely single prize archetype. Maybe you even just lead with Blacephalon, you attach 3 energies to it, and then you attack for 130. You're probably going to get KO'd in the meantime, but then you could go to a second Blacephalon, hit for 130 again, and then maybe just to finish off the game, maybe we go into our Stoke Charizard, and then we just sort of like steamroll our opponent there. There's a lot of scenarios where I think Blacephalon could be absolutely incredible. I think this card is a lot better than people give it credit for. Now, one thing to note is that it is a little bit awkward to lead off with, right? Now, we do have Celesteela, so if we do lead with Blacephalon, we can retreat out for free into a different Ultra Beast with Celesteela, but that Pokemon that we retreat into has to be an Ultra Beast Pokemon, and this is certainly not a Pokemon that I think is going to be very good as a lead-off option. Maybe going second if we're ahead on the energy curve, but even if we are just leading off with Blacephalon, I don't see a lot of scenarios where we live long enough to even use Beat Punk, so we also don't want to attack and then KO ourselves, because then our next Pokemon goes to the up into the active spot, and then is on our opponent's turn and they can KO us. So it's not a great lead-off Pokemon. It is going to be a little bit awkward, especially if you lead off with it, but it is going to be a really, really incredibly strong option. The ability to basically chain together some of these 130 damage attacks with Lusamine is going to be really, really strong. 130 is crazy, no matter how you slice it. Basically, it's a fire Pokemon, so we're going to be KOing things like Meowscarada without Leaf Cape in 1 hit. So it's really, really strong. I really like Blacephalon. I don't know how good it will be, but it definitely has the potential to be a lot better than some people think it will be. Really, really cool Pokemon, and I think it's definitely reliant on Lusamine for sure. But again, in the late game, the odds of you having Lusamine in your hand are really high. Like, you got to think about it. And yeah, so there you go. There's Blacephalon. I don't really have too much else to say about it. I mean, it really is kind of a combo piece with Lusamine, but 130 is 130, and setting it up in 1 turn is certainly going to be kind of crazy. Yeah, we've already talked about Celesteela, so let's move forward to Naganadel. And Naganadel is also kind of a little bit of an underwhelming Pokemon. This is a Stage 1 Pokemon, 100 HP, Dark type, weak to fighting, retreat cost of 2. Now, this is a Stage 1 Pokemon with a 1 energy attack cost. That's typically, like I said, what we like to see on Stage 1 Pokemon. That way, going first, we can evolve first and then attack on our second turn with the attack here, Electro House. Again, very interesting attack names here. It does 40 damage, and then you poison your opponent. So this is certainly a card that we could pair with the Nihilegos or Nihilegos. However you say that Pokemon's name, and then effectively do 40 damage and then tick down poison for 30 if you have 2 of them on your bench. So it's not terrible, it's not great. It is certainly sort of an aggressive single prize archetype that I think could see play, but in the format right now, there's really no way to like search or guarantee that you're going to get that Stage 1 Pokemon out on your second turn, which kind of makes it a little bit of a downside. Of course, we do have Pokemon communications, so there are some ways to, of course, play, or we also have Iono as well, to get those Stage 1 Pokemon out a little bit earlier, but 40 damage doesn't seem that great. Yeah, we are poisoning, so that is somewhat relevant. Maybe this could be really good against, or paired with maybe some other Pokemon, again, like Scolipede. Who knows? We'll have to see. It is what it is, you know what I mean? We've seen Pokemon like this. They sometimes see play, but not really. They're typically a little bit underwhelming. 100 HP is somewhat decent, but nothing too crazy. And it is a Dark type Pokemon as well. So I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe it will be good in some scenarios. And again, we do have Nihilego or Nihilego. I'm just going to call it Nihilego because I don't know exactly the pronunciation for it, but anyway, that is Naganadel. And we also have Zeraora, and Zeraora is also a very interesting Pokemon. At first glance, this card actually seems fairly decent, but I don't know how I feel about it. It's a basic lightning type Pokemon, 90 HP, retreat cost of 1. Again, I would have liked to see free retreat on this thing, and then it is weak to fighting. It's got the ability, Thunderclap Flash, which, again, these names are crazy, by the way. But anyway, at the end of your turn, you take a lightning energy from your energy zone, and then you attach it to this Pokemon. Now, this reads kind of interestingly. We have to kind of think about it a little bit. So, at the end of our turn, so this is an effect that basically procs, at the end of our first turn, this is an ability that procs no matter kind of what we do. If we're going second, and we attack with whatever Pokemon, whether this is in our active spot or on our bench, at the end of our first turn, we are generating an energy and automatically attaching it to this Pokemon. So as long as it's on our bench or on our board to some degree, on our first turn, that is +1 energy. So it's not terrible, technically speaking, going first. We can get that energy on the board and then maybe have some Dawn combos. So that's the only thing I'm kind of looking at with this Pokemon. Now we are effectively in some scenarios, doing 50 damage for like 1 energy because that 1 energy is free, but it's not something that we're going to be able to attack with going first on our second turn, and that certainly feels quite bad. So there's other Pokemon that can do that, similar to like Skarmory or Carnivine. I don't think it's as good as those Pokemon. It does have more HP. 90 HP is somewhat decent, but to me, this is kind of like a guaranteed extra energy on the board if we do get Zeraora out, and I think that's going to be certainly really relevant for Dawn combinations, and I think that this Pokemon could be phenomenal if that's sort of really what this Pokemon, has a use with. Like in certain Dawn decks, I could see Zeraora just seeing play because it doesn't matter like if we're playing electric energies, it doesn't matter like if we're playing an electric type deck. It literally is just a guaranteed free energy as long as we get Zeraora out on our board. Now, one thing I will say is that if we don't get this Pokemon out early, this Pokemon's useless. It effectively is useless. So that's to me why I don't necessarily think this Pokemon is that good. But having that extra energy even on your bench could be pretty relevant, as well as if it is a Pokemon that we lead with, it's going to get a free energy, which kind of makes it a free pivot. So in electric type decks, if we do lead with it, we're going to basically get free retreat on our next turn to retreat into whatever Pokemon that we want. At the same time, we could also just attach with it and then start attacking for 50. So this could see play with Tapu Koko, it could see play with Oricorio, and it could see play in just a variety of different electric type decks. I think that the effect here is very, very interesting. But like I said, this ability should proc whether we're in the active spot or on our bench, and it should also just work no matter what kind of energy type we're running in our energy zone. It's just, do we get Zeraora out on our first turn? If we do, cool, we get a free energy. And that's really what it comes down to. Could be really good for Dawn combos on our second turn, but I don't necessarily know if we're going to see that too often. I don't know. It could be really good. Again, it's really interesting. It's a really kind of interesting Pokemon that we haven't really seen anything like this before. And yeah, theoretically speaking, if this is on our bench, we can still attack on our first turn. And then once our turn ends, we still generate that energy, right? So we could pair this with some type of Pokemon that could attack on our first turn going second. And then we could attack and get that extra energy. So it's somewhat relevant, right? Like this pair with Tapu Koko is quite good, theoretically. But I don't know. It's really weird. This is one of the weirder Pokemon of the set. Don't know really what else to think about it, other than the fact that, like I said, in Dawn combos, it could be good. Dawn combo decks where we can move the energy from our bench Pokemon to our active. There's also Volkner. There's a lot of different, like, electric type scenarios. And electric type is in a really weird spot. Maybe it's just a card that we pair with Oricorio. Who knows? We'll have to see. But anyway, there is Zeraora. We should move a little bit quicker because, geez Louise, it's already been 32 minutes. But I love talking about the new cards. We always drag on like crazy. Next up is a really interesting one as well. This is Shiinotic. This is not an Ultra Beast. It's just a little mushroom guy. Psychic-type Pokemon, Stage 1, Week 2, Steel, which is interesting, and then retreat cost of 2. It's got the ability Illuminate. Once during your turn, you may put a random Pokemon from your deck into your hand. So basically thinning your deck of any Pokemon. This is a Psychic Pokemon with 2 colorless and its attack cost 40. We can play this in really any deck. Now, I don't know how I feel about it, and I know some people thought this card was really, really strong, but it is a Stage 2 Pokemon, or sorry, a Stage 1 Pokemon, meaning that we have to basically we can't get this out until our second turn, and we have to find that Stage 1 Pokemon while also leading off with the basic Pokemon. And technically, if we do that, we can thin through our deck fairly easily. This could be really relevant in some decks that are playing a bunch of different Pokemon, but at the same time, I just don't really know like how worth playing this card is going to be in your deck. You have to think that if you're playing a card like this, you're probably going to be playing, it says once per turn, but you should be able to do it once per turn per Shiinotic, so theoretically, you could do this twice per turn if you had 2 of these Pokemon. on your board. But yeah, if you're playing this Pokemon, you're probably playing like a 2-2 lineup of it, right? You wouldn't just play like one Morlul and then one Shiinotic because it's not very consistent. So if that's the case, like half the time you're just going to be pulling out basically another Morlul or Shiinotic from your deck. So I don't know, like it definitely seems quite fine. And then again, in rare candy decks, maybe it is going to end up being worth running just for the simple fact that we have the ability to thin out our deck and further increase the odds of us finding those evolution Pokemon. So I don't know exactly how the math works or how the consistency works with this card. At first glance, this card does not seem very good to me, but maybe it does end up just being really good. Now, again, it is going to take up space in your deck. You could play Pokemon Communications. You could play any other card in the game that's useful. Iono, things that maybe shuffle your deck or thin your deck. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of different cards that you could play in your deck in place of Shiinotic. And it is kind of 90 HP, so it is kind of like Sabrina bait. It can just kind of get brought up and then KO'd. You can lead with it. It could get KO'd pretty easily. So I don't necessarily think that this card is like phenomenal, but the effect is really strong, and maybe it does see play in certain decks, and maybe it is a pretty relevant Pokemon. But to me, I don't really know if there's going to be a scenario where we would play Shiinotic. I don't know. It seems kind of strange to me. I would love to hear your guys' opinions, by the way, about all of these cards, right? So this is a very in-depth video. We're talking strategy. We're talking meta. We're lacking a little bit of context, which we'll get later, but I would love to hear your opinions about all of these cards down in the comments section below. We love the long-form videos here on the channel. I could talk all day about new cards, new strategies, new ideas, so that's kind of what this video is all about. It's going to be a long one, but again, comment below your opinions on all of these cards. I would love to hear it. Next up, we've got Pheromosa, another basic Ultra Beast Pokemon. Grass type, 70 HP, weak to fire, retreat cost of 1. Pheromosa is one of the fastest Pokemon in all of Pokemon. So again, I would have liked to see it have free retreat. But anyway, I understand why they didn't do that with Celesteela and the double pivot stuff. But the attack here, Jump Blues. Whatever that means. Grass energy, 20 damage, and then it does 20 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This is actually quite good because you can choose which Pokemon you're doing the bench damage to, and that's quite strong. So a basic grass Pokemon, 70 HP, we have access to Leaf Cape, that's 100 HP, we have access to Erica's, and it's a Pokemon that can attack on your first turn going second. We can deal bench damage. At first glance, this is certainly a Pokemon that we're probably going to want to pair with Decidueye EX from Celestial Guardians. We can, do some early damage to the active and to a bench, target a bench Pokemon to then snipe it with Decidueye. I think that's kind of what this card is meant to be, but at the same time, it's just a really, really strong Pokemon. I could see this seeing play in like almost any grass deck. It's just really, really strong. Targeted bench damage is phenomenal. Like, think about how good Greninja is right now, right? So there are scenarios where like you could just lead with Pheromosa, play Double Cyrus in your deck, and then just stop your opponent from ever going into a Pokemon that they want to go into, right? And you can even like bring up like a non-evolved like basic Pokemon or a fossil, anything like that. So Pheromosa with Decidueye and then maybe even, or just with Cyrus, it's going to be really, really strong. I actually phenomenally love this Pokemon. I think it's going to be probably one of the more influential Pokemon that comes out in the set, purely just because this attack is super, super strong, and Grass has a lot of support as well. Like I said, with Leaf Cape, 100 HP on this basic is crazy if you think about it. There's scenarios where you could get this attack off 3 or 4 times before Pheromosa goes down, especially in like a ramp-heavy format right now. And I think that's pretty crazy. We also hit for weakness on a variety of different Pokemon, things like Garchomp. So it's somewhat pretty, it's actually quite decent. It also hits Guzzlord for weakness as well. I think Grass is in a really good spot. It's one of the best types in the game right now. Tons of support for the Grass type. This card is very, very flexible, as long as it's in a Grass deck, of course, but it's just really, really good. This is honestly just a great Pokemon. Probably going to see play all over the place. If there's another scenario where maybe it's worth running Pheromosa, let me know. But at first glance, this kind of seems like a Decidueye pairing Pokemon. But anyway, Pheromosa, super, super good. We also have type Null, which does make me think that we might see like a Silvally in the set. It hasn't been announced, but again, it might be one of those EX Pokemon that we haven't seen yet. Type Null, basic, colorless, 80 HP Pokemon, retreat cost of 2, weak to fighting. It's got quick blow, 20 damage, flip a coin of heads, it does 20 more damage. Very irrelevant Pokemon. Again, this is something that nobody would play, but again, that makes me feel like it's definitely going to evolve into Silvally, which could be an EX Pokemon, could be a very strong Pokemon. I believe they showed us Type Null because we probably will be getting the evolution for it, which means that we don't really have much to say about it other than the fact that Silvally's coming in. It's probably going to be at least a fairly decent Pokemon with some interesting effect. Here is a 1-star rarity kind of full art Rowlet. So I guess we're getting a new Rowlet card, maybe new Decidueye cards. Who knows? Yeah, I don't know if we're going to play this one over like the Skill Link Rowlet. Fury attack, 1 grass energy, do 10 damage, flip through coins. So yeah, could do 10, could do 0 actually, but could do 0, 10, 20, or 30 damage. I don't know. I would rather just be able to hit 10 for the bench, personally, on the Skill Link Rowlet. But anyway, there it is. I love the art, by the way. I mean, this art is phenomenal. He's like in a little basket. Look at him. He's just chilling. Okay, What do we got next? Okay, so we got some more underwhelming cards in my mind, but maybe they will end up being better as time goes on. We'll have to see. This is Stakataka, the greatest name in all of Pokemon history. Basic metal type Pokemon, Ultra Beast again. Not an EX, 110 HP, which is fairly decent, less than Celesteela, but it's metal type, so keep that in mind. It's got Brass Rock is the attack for metal and a colorless, 40 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, this attack, or this Pokemon takes 20 less damage from attacks. A pretty bad Pokemon. I just don't really see a scenario where we would ever play this. Maybe in a world where, yeah, honestly, I don't know. I can't really think about where or why we would play Stakataka. There's probably better options. As like a leadoff, we would probably rather play Skarmory. 110 damage is somewhat relevant, so minus 20, so our opponent has to hit for 130 to KO us. I mean, it could be good. It certainly could be good, like when you're facing down a Meowscarada, but other than that, I don't really see where we would really use this. We're weak to fire, retreat cost of 3. So there's Stakataka. I'm a little bit disappointed in it. It's, of course, an incredible Pokemon. Well, it's an Ultra Beast, technically not a Pokemon, but an incredible name. Just a really funny Pokemon, but the card itself is quite bad in my mind. I haven't put too much stock in Stakataka, even though the name is incredible. Next up, we've got Xerkitree, and Xerkitree is, well, a little bit underwhelming at first glance to me. Basic Lightning type Ultra Beast, 100 HP. It has a retreat cost of 2. It is weak to fighting, and we have Electronica is the attack for 1 lightning and 2 colorless, 60 damage, and then your opponent's Pokemon is now confused. So confusion is confusion. We've kind of seen it for a little while now. Hasn't seen that much play. Hasn't been that relevant. I just don't know. Like, to me, it's like, all right, I mean, are we really doing this? Technically, we can set this thing up in one turn with Lusamine, and that certainly could be good. It kind of, to me, feels sort of like a last-ditch Everett type strategy where, you know, maybe our opponent, like, it just sort of, like, takes the KO on our previous Pokemon, and we don't really have anything left in the tank, but, you know, technically we can go into Xerkitree, get a confusion off, and then do 120 damage on our opponent's Pokemon to win the game. So it could be like one of those like trump card strategies where it's like, all right, like here we go. The game's over, but I have a chance on a coin flip to stall for a turn and win. So it could come in handy, kind of like how Pink Carson was way back in the day, but maybe a little bit better. You kind of need Lusamine for it. But anyway, it's certainly interesting. I don't think it's like terrible, but I don't know if it's going to see really that much play. And then we also have Kartana, which is similar to Pheromosa, but it's far-fetched, guys. This is far-fetched, but it's grass type. So think what you want about it. 60 HP basic, grass Pokemon, Ultra Beast, 1 energy in its attack cost, Thrash Metal, 40 damage, retreat cost of 1, weak to fire. So this is literally a grass type Farfetch'd. Now, again, we could be getting other Ultra Beast supporter cards that are like, hey, your Ultra Beast does 20 or 30 more damage this turn. That means that this card could be somewhat relevant. Farfetch'd isn't a bad card by any means. And again, it is a grass Pokemon, so Leaf Cape can bring this up to 90 HP. That's somewhat relevant, to be fair. So it's very aggressive, very fast pace. It's kind of like Carnivine, but like it might be worse, it might be better, depending on like the decks that it slots into. But it's literally Farfetch'd. I think Farfetch'd might have 50 HP, or does it have 60? I think it has 60, but yeah. Grass type Farfetch'd, Ultra Beast, Kartana. Somewhat interesting, not gonna lie. We've seen Lusamine, we already took a look at it. This is a card that I think is gonna be at the core of all of the Ultra Beast strategies. And then we have Alolan Diglett, the greatest card that's ever been printed in Pokemon Pocket. I don't know what this tells us, but I mean, really all it tells us is that we are getting Alolan Dugtrio. I don't know if that's gonna be an EX Pokemon or not. I believe we already have an Alolan Dugtrio card, but anyway. Basic metal type, 60 HP. The attack is called Happened to Headbutt, 40 damage, flip a coin. If tails, it does nothing. So nothing you can say about it other than that we will be getting the evolution card somewhere in here. Now, next up, we have a couple of promo cards that were also leaked, which are quite interesting. This is sort of the biggest talk of the town, I would say, which is Ultra Necrozma EX. This card is kind of crazy. So this is a basic dragon type Pokemon, 150 HP. This is a promo, which means we should be able to get this for free from some type of a event in the game, probably a solo battle event. Promo cards typically aren't that good. They never really see that much play, so I don't really see this being any different. Theoretically, though, this card is kind of crazy. So 150 HP, which is, again, kind of that magic number as for a basic Pokemon. It's got 2 attacks. We don't know the retreat cost. We don't know the weakness, although it's dragon, so it's probably not weak to anything. I don't know the retreat cost, but it has 2 attacks. Photon Claw for 3 colorless, that is 60 damage. And then we have Shoegaze or Shugazi. I don't know exactly what that means or how to say that. Something, I think, maybe musical themed. I don't know. But this does 120 damage for 2 psychic energies and 2 metal energies. And then you discard the top 5 cards of each player's deck. What? Hello? There's only 20 cards in our deck. By the time this Pokemon gets set up, we might not even have 5 cards in our deck. Theoretically, I mean, the 4 energies on this Pokemon, 2 Psychic and 2 Metal, you might be thinking, like, how are we even going to get these energies onto Ultra Necrozma? Probably we're going to have to play, I don't even know. I guess we'll probably play, there's 2 ways I can think. Of course, Lusamine, so we can play like a both Metal or Psychic type deck, or we could play like Giratina in a Metal type deck, and then we could generate those energies, go into Giratina, attack, get KO'd, and then we can Lusamine up those Psychic energies to Ultra Necrozma while manually attaching the Metal energies. We could also play Lunala, so you could play Lunala Giratina in a Metal type deck, generate those energies with Giratina, move them to Ultra Necrozma while you're attaching the manual Metal energies to Necrozma. That's one way to do it. But 2 Psychic and 2 Metal is certainly a tall task. That's going to be fairly awkward to get going no matter what. It's also 4 energies. So like theoretically, I think theoretically the earliest we can get this attack off is by turn 3. However, it's a little bit awkward. You need Giratina, you need Necrozma in the active, and then you need Lunala on your bench. That's the only way I can really see us getting this off on turn 3. But for the most part, we're probably going to get this off by turn 4, maybe even turn 5. So discarding 5 energies, like 120 isn't that much damage, but discarding 5 cards is crazy. It's not only off of your opponent's deck, but off your deck as well. So, God forbid we have like some important cards in our deck. Like, it's just a really, really interesting Pokemon. I think it's going to be a little bit too awkward. But theoretically, if there was a way to get this attack off, like consistently on turn 3, or maybe somehow on turn 2, which I guess theoretically you could on turn 2? No, I don't think you could. But maybe, I don't know. If there was a way to get this attack off early and consistently, then it could be crazy, because discarding 5 cards from either deck could just kind of win you the game, because you could discard like all of your opponent's rare candies or stage 2 Pokemon or whatever. So it could be kind of a win condition, but you have to get this card out early enough for it to do anything, and it's never going to be consistent, because again, yes, we have Giratina to generate those Psychic energies, and we could play just Metal energies for our energy zone, and then rely on Lunala, or just go into Giratina, KO, get KO'd, and then Lusamine those energies up. I don't know. It's certainly going to be an interesting Pokemon. Maybe it ends up breaking the game. Who knows? I mean, I don't know if it's going to be consistent enough. Also, like, people are literally going like rare candy turn 2 Charizard Stoke. So you're probably going to get hit by 150 on turn 3 or turn 4 anyway. So it's like, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. Certainly a very awkward Pokemon, but one of the craziest attacks that's ever been in Pokemon Pocket by far. I mean, 4 energies, 120, discarding 5 cards is crazy. Like I said, by the time this thing gets set up, your opponent might even literally have 5 energies in their deck, or 5 cards in their deck. So that's kind of crazy. And then the last couple of cards we have are the same card. One's a promo, one's not, and that's Poipole. I believe that's how you say it. 60 HP, Dark-type Pokemon. This evolves into Naganadel. It's the basic attack version. 60 HP, we don't know the weakness, we don't know the retreat cost, and it has the step attack, 20 damage, flip 2 coins, it does 20 damage for each head. So, I mean, theoretically speaking, if we are going second, then it is still a Pokemon that can do some damage before we evolve into Naganadel, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be that crazy. Naganadel as a card wasn't that crazy anyway, so I don't know. I don't have like too much to say about Poipole or Naganadel, but there they are. That is the card that evolves into it. And that's it, guys. That's all of the cards that we've seen so far. This was quite a bit of a long video, 50 minutes, but we went in depth and we really talked about all of these particular cards, and we talked about the strategies and theoretically how we could play them. We lack a lot of the context, right? So in the upcoming days, when we get the full set release, and then we get, of course, all of the other cards, all of the supporter cards or other EX Pokemon, once we get the full set release, we'll understand truthfully, how all of these cards synergize and maybe how we can play them. Certainly, some cards seem very underwhelming at first glance and probably will end up being underwhelming, but some of them seem really interesting and really, really good. Again, some sleepers to me might even be like Zeraora. I think it could be actually quite decent. I think Blacephalon is quite a sleeper as well. I don't know if it'll end up being like super meta because it might not be consistent enough, but the potential for this card is crazy. And then again, I think Guzzlord is insane, or Guzzlord. I think Celesteela could be a staple in all of these Ultra Beast decks. Pheromosa is incredible in general. I think it'll see play all over the place. And then the Nihilego stuff is also kind of interesting as well with Poison Barb in some decks, maybe just paired with Guzzlord. So yeah, that's all we really have so far. One thing I will say though, is that it does kind of remind me a little bit, the set at least, reminds me of Triumphant Light, in the sense that a lot of the cards that came out in Triumphant Light were kind of exclusive like to that particular set and the cards within it, right? They all interacted with each other, but they were kind of designed to all be played together. It kind of limits our strategies and our deck building scenarios. And, some of the cards from Triumphant Light certainly were really, really strong, but as we see, like Carnivine, Crobat, and Arceus, like it all is like one package, and those cards don't really work well with like all of the other cards. They kind of are meant to go together. very much kind of feels like that's what this mini set is going to be. It's going to probably introduce a couple of really new strong archetypes and some new strategies, but a lot of these cards, maybe like sans like Zeraora or Pheromosa, like a lot of these cards are going to be played sort of only with each other, which does certainly limit the way that we're going to be able to play these Pokemon. But I think that's fine when you consider the fact that, you know, the format right now is very open, very wide open. And that just throwing all of these maybe new archetypes with the Ultra Beasts in the mix is certainly going to just change the metagame up enough to be really, really interesting. And we should get enough new cards in the set where, you know, theoretically, we're probably going to get like 6 or 7 like new archetypes that are all like somewhat playable. A couple of those will be, you know, very good. Some won't be very good at all, but at least we're going to get a lot of new decks basically off of the fact that, you know, a lot of these cards are fairly decent and they're all going to make each other stronger. They're all going to pair with each other fairly well. So I think that's fine. I think when a mini set comes out, you're kind of a little bit limited in terms of like how you can build out that set. We've seen things like Mythical Island, which was really a set that kind of expanded upon all of the, you know, the cards and the strategies that we had already with Genetic Apex. And then we've seen something like Triumphant Light, which again is very independent and kind of has its own archetypes sort of bundled all into one. That's certainly what this set feels like to me. But I'm really, really excited, and hopefully you guys are too. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. I really, really do appreciate all of the support on the channel. And again, stay tuned because we're going to be covering a bunch of stuff as time goes on. And we'll do probably some prospective deck lists here in the upcoming days, maybe over the weekend, maybe next week if we get some more cards released. But we can certainly start to bake up some strategies on how we can play these cards and maybe what kind of decks we would play these cards into. So definitely stay tuned for all of that stuff. And when the cards come out, stay tuned because we're going to be talking all about it. Definitely going to be really, really fun. And I'm just excited for new cards. It's my favorite part of making content here on YouTube, and my favorite part of Pokemon Pocket is all of the new cards that we get every month. It's just a really, really fun time, and I'm just certainly very, very excited. All right, guys, let's wrap this up. Long video. I apologize. Hopefully you guys found this interesting, but I could talk all day about new Pokemon cards to Pokemon Pocket. All right, peace out, guys. Have a good one. See you guys later, and yeah. Bye.